I would be just quite content, Charles, if you all keep singing. That would be stunning. Well, on this, the beginning of our Lenten season, Ash Wednesday, we call it, what we're doing is, during the season of Lent, is laying the groundwork for some virtues, things that matter. To practice prayer, for example, beginning with prayer just simply as silence, and God bless you if you can find a silent place in your life, silent place in your house, there's no radio, TV, or anything else going on, just silence, so that you have the opportunity to meditate or contemplate, or just to think about stuff, to think about the way things are, and maybe the way that you think they ought to be, and to have enough time in that privacy, in that time of silence, to think it through, without all of the background noise that goes with all of the commercials and advertisements and cacophony of news stations that influence and infect our brains and our hearing. Fasting, or denying ourselves, as Jesus talks about it, is not so much a matter of denying ourselves, but a recognition that we're people of habits, and that habits of the heart, as Jesus teaches them, have to be cultivated. Just like when you start your tomato patch sometime in the spring, you're going to cultivate it. The same thing with a habit of the heart. They need to be cultivated and fertilized and cared for and tended. And finally, making a recognition about the nature of your life as a gift. The fact that you give gifts just because. That's not something that the world encourages, you well know that. But that is what Jesus describes, and certainly God himself describes, as a virtue and as a way of living as a follower of his. Just giving gifts for the sake of gift giving. He calls it charis, or grace, or chaira, joy. Just giving gifts for the sheer joy of doing it. So those are the kinds of treasures about which Jesus speaks in this particular teaching, that to make life worth living is to add the components and the pieces of prayer, of charis, gift-giving, and chara, joy, and prayer, and recognizing that those are the things which, when they become visible and real and physical, are really the treasures that make our lives well worth living. Now, there's additional pieces here that go with that. Think about the fact that if you can fast for a day or two, maybe to lose 2 pounds, and yes, you can do it, you can suck it up and do it. Think about what that would mean. All right, you won't be such an easy sucker for all of the carrion and prey which is out there preying on you via commercials and TV and everything else, and all of the instant gratification which is so easy for us to get and which is so called upon in our culture. We won't be so vulnerable to the domination of the world with the promise of rapid and empty reward. Just by saying no to something for a day or two, you establish your freedom. The second piece, of course, is a disciple who prays can depend on God's judgment rather than the world's valuation of you, so that you won't be at the mercy of popularity or fashion or pride or envy. To be able to just pray in private and contemplate the meaning not only of the world but also of your own life. And also a disciple who can give alms quietly will avoid all of the questions of politics. Think about it. You won't have the opportunity to be labeled as a socialist or an Ayn Rand individualist or a Democrat or a Republican. You'll just be able to be you, giving gifts because. Now Matthew uses a term, or as Jesus used the term thesaurus. You all know a thesaurus, the big thick book that has synonyms, similar words, like a bazillion of them for each word, and antonyms. That's the word which is used in Greek that we translate treasure. Yeah, think about that for a minute. What are the treasures that God gives you? The treasures that you have been given are the treasures of thesaurus, synonyms and antonyms. And wars are often started because words fail, and politicians decide to not practice their use of words anymore. The right word in the right moment can change the course of history, as you know. And the right word, in fact, did change the world, and Jesus was that word. And keep in mind Martin Luther's understanding of the word. It's not just verbal words, as Luther understands it in the Bible. Words are also visual, body words, body language, body use. And so, when Jesus talks about the treasures that we have been given as a thesaurus, he's talking about us as people who are with fasting, with prayer and gift-giving, with those virtues and disciplines well in hand, and practicing them privately apart from the cacophony of noises, we're able to have the right words at the right time, in the right way. And that is the gift and the hope of the season of Lent, that we begin to sharpen those up. Now, just to give you a sense of how Jesus talks about this a little bit, he says, the kingdom of heaven in Matthew 13 is like a treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and hid again, and from joy over it he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. So Jesus obviously thinks that you, as people of faith, who are able to have the right word at the right time, in the right place, in the right way, by means of your discipline and practice of virtue, are going to be a wonderful gift, charis, kaira, to the world in which we live. In Matthew 12, he talks this way. The good person brings out of his good treasure, good thesaurus, what is good. The evil person brings out of his evil thesaurus, what is evil. But I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they shall give an accounting for it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Keep in mind the way Luther understood and defined word. Not just as verbal words, but also as action of our bodies and behaviors. So if Jesus is your treasure, your thesaurus, and your life, therefore, is a treasure to others and to goodness, people will know it, and so will you, because it will roll off your tongue amongst your choice of words in any given circumstance. You will have the opportunity, as in the thesaurus, to pick out those words and behaviors which are going to add goodness and hope and meaning, not only to your own life, but to other people's lives too. He also goes on to talk about what badness and evil can do. He uses the word destroy. It really means neglect. That word does. So if you neglect yourself and you neglect the development of your faith and your virtues, you're really destroying your own life. And therefore will likely destroy the lives of other people around you. The same with stealing. To steal is not just to take possession of something that doesn't belong to you. It's also a violation of a person in some very fundamental ways. And it's to rob them of their dignity, not just of their belongings. And that's what sin does. Every act of sin adds a web of distrust in the world. And yet every act, and this is where Jesus is talking about the disciplines of virtues, of fasting and praying and gift giving. Every act of virtue and faith in that regard begins to restore the dignity of people. It breaks the bonds of ignorance and neglect, and it restores broken people into more communal relationships. Just a final word, the word religion. Does anybody have a stretched ligament or anything like that right now? Huh? Torn? No? Okay. Religion, ligion, means ligament. So if you have a stretched or a torn ligament, to re-ligiate means to rebind it. And that is why we practice religion. It is a rebinding of that which is torn apart and no longer functions. Whether that be people, communities, politics, you name it. Religion is a rebinding of that which is torn apart. In Rome, in Jesus' day, if a slave ran away, the masters would hobble them by cutting their ligaments in the back of the calves. That way they couldn't run away. But you get the idea. You get the gift. The gift of the virtues which have been offered to you. Jesus advised to practice them, to get away from the noise of your life for a while. To practice those things in private so you can get your head screwed on right again. And then get refocused on what? On religion. Not organized religion, but the kind of religion which is the rebinding of brokenness and tornness and separation. That's your gift to the world. And that's why we practice a Lenten discipline. Get our heads screwed on right, get thinking about rebinding and our part in